The Titanic disaster occurred on April 15, 1912, in the North Atlantic when RMS Titanic, the most luxurious and magnificent passenger ship of the early 20th century, struck an iceberg. The incident occurred during the ship's maiden voyage and turned into a major tragedy. Titanic, being the largest ship of its time, garnered significant attention and was designed to cater to a wide range of passengers, from the wealthy to retired workers, worldwide. Departing from the port of Southampton, England, on April 10, 1912, the ship made stops at Cherbourg, France, and Queenstown, now known as Cove, Ireland, before setting sail for New York with great hope and excitement across the Atlantic Ocean. However, on the night of April 14, 1912, the ship collided with an iceberg. Considering the safety standards of the time, it was evident that the Titanic was moving rapidly before hitting the iceberg, and the crew was insufficient to prevent the disaster. Following the collision, the ship began to take on water. Due to flaws in its design, there was inadequate compartmentalization between the watertight compartments, allowing water to spread quickly. The Titanic sank in 2 hours and 40 minutes. Lifeboats were insufficient, and staying in the water, especially under cold conditions, made survival challenging. There were a total of 2,224 people on board, and only 706 survived. The disaster had a profound impact on ship safety standards and maritime regulations. The Titanic disaster was a tragic event that resulted in loss of life and deeply shook the maritime world. Substantial improvements were made in safety standards and maritime protocols in the aftermath of the tragedy to prevent similar incidents from occurring again. Titanic's captain was Edward John Smith. Smith was a British mariner and one of the most experienced captains of the White Star Line Company. He joined the White Star Line in 1904 and captained several large passenger ships. He was appointed as the captain for the Titanic's voyage. Unfortunately, that night, the ship struck an iceberg and, tragically, Captain Smith was among those who lost their lives during the sinking of the Titanic. It is known that Smith chose to stay on board until the very end to ensure the safety of the passengers. Captain Edward John Smith did not survive the Titanic disaster. The Titanic, sinking after colliding with an iceberg on April 15, 1912, is the most famous passenger ship in the world. This event resulted in the loss of more than 1,500 lives. The Titanic, built by the White Star Line Company, was considered the largest passenger ship of its time. It was constructed at the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast, UK, and launched on May 31, 1911. The Titanic began its journey from Southampton, England, on April 10, 1912, with stops in Queenstown, now known as Cove, Ireland, and then heading to New York, United States. However, the ship tragically sank on its maiden voyage. On the night of April 14, 1912, around 11:40 p.m., the ship struck an iceberg in the North Atlantic near the Newfoundland Banks. The collision caused significant damage to the ship's side, leading to rapid flooding. The Titanic sank completely at 2:20 a.m. on April 15, 1912. The sinking of the Titanic became one of the greatest tragedies of its time. Due to the insufficient number of lifeboats and inadequate rescue equipment on board, a large number of people lost their lives. Of the total 2,224 passengers and crew on board, more than 1,500 perished. Following this disaster, maritime regulations and safety measures were significantly improved. The sinking of the Titanic has inspired numerous films, books, and musical works, symbolizing both its tragedy and the lessons for humanity. In the vicinity of the area where the Titanic sank, there were other ships, but the limited communication and rescue technology of that time hindered a full understanding of the severity of the emergency. While emergency signals and calls from the Titanic were relayed to other ships, some captains did not take them seriously or misinterpreted them. As a result, the RMS Carpathia, a nearby ship, received distress calls and swiftly arrived at the scene to rescue survivors from the sinking Titanic. However, this rescue attempt was not enough to prevent the Titanic's sinking, and a significant number of people lost their lives. Some of the survivors of the Titanic disaster, especially American survivors, filed lawsuits seeking compensation. In particular, they sued the White Star Line Company. Some of these lawsuits resulted in compensation, but others ended without resolution after prolonged legal processes. Many lawsuits were filed based on the claim that the safety measures on the ship were insufficient, and incorrect behavior was exhibited during the sinking. The White Star Line Company argued that the ship's equipment and safety standards met the requirements of that period. As a result, some survivors did receive compensation, but it cannot be said that justice was completely served or that the victims were fully satisfied. For example, it is known that Madeline Astor, the wife of John Jacob Astor IV, one of the prominent businessmen among the survivors, accepted an annual compensation of $50,000 for transportation, maintenance, and support. This amount was considered quite high during that period. Yes, some crew members and passengers managed to survive the Titanic disaster. The number of survivors was around 700. Among them were women, children, some male passengers, and crew members. Survivors used various rescue methods, including boarding lifeboats, jumping into the sea, being found by rescue ships, and others. The RMS Carpathia, the nearest ship, took on board those who survived the Titanic and brought them to safety. However, a significant number of people lost their lives during the sinking, with most of them perishing by freezing or drowning in the sea. Not all the victims of the Titanic disaster could be found. During the rescue operations conducted after the disaster, some of the deceased were recovered from the sea, but many were either buried in the depths of the ocean or drifted into open seas. In total, approximately 1,500 people lost their lives, and some bodies were never found. In the years following the Titanic disaster, some bodies were discovered near the wreckage site. During an exploration journey in 1985, some bodies were identified near the wreckage of the Titanic. However, most of these bodies were either buried in their places or returned to the sea. Efforts to find some missing bodies from the Titanic wreckage continue in ongoing exploration projects. However, it may not be possible to find or identify all of them. After the Titanic disaster, the White Star Line Company went through a challenging period that negatively affected both its reputation and financial status. It faced criticism from the public, and its reliability was questioned. Shortly after the sinking of the Titanic, the White Star Line faced a significant risk of bankruptcy. The company's financial situation became difficult due to lawsuits and compensation claims following the disaster. However, it survived the threat of bankruptcy with the help of rival companies and government support. In 1914, the White Star Line was acquired by the International Mercantile Marine Company, IMM, a large British shipping company. This acquisition helped White Star Line become part of IMM and restructure its resources. In 1934, the White Star Line merged with Cunard Line, adopting the name Cunard White Star Line. This merger improved the company's financial strength and operations. However, officially, the existence of the White Star Line came to an end, and the brand name disappeared. After the Titanic disaster, a ship directly replicating the design and features of the Titanic was not built. However, around 100 years after the sinking of the Titanic, a project called Titanic II was announced. The Titanic II project, initiated by Australian businessman Clive Palmer in 2012, aimed to replicate the original ship's design and aesthetics while incorporating modern safety measures and advanced technologies. The current status of the Titanic II project is not known. The removal of the Titanic wreckage would be a complex process involving technical and ethical challenges. The Titanic is submerged in the deep waters of the North Atlantic, and the location of the wreckage is in international waters. Technically, the equipment, resources, and expertise required to extract the Titanic wreckage would be substantial. Over time, the wreck has deteriorated, and it has broken into various pieces, making it challenging to maintain its integrity. From an ethical perspective, the Titanic wreck is a significant historical monument and is considered a respectful resting place by many. The removal of the wreckage could alter its historical and cultural value and impact the authenticity of the protected area. For these reasons, there is currently no official initiative or plan to extract the Titanic wreckage. Generally, the emphasis is on preserving the wreck, conducting scientific research, and maintaining its status as a monument. The iceberg that caused the Titanic's sinking was, indeed, an iceberg. On April 14, 1912, the Titanic struck an iceberg NE. We can consider some basic differences to compare the Titanic with today's cruise ships. Size: Titanic was a large ship by the standards of its time, but today's cruise ships are generally much larger. Modern cruise ships are designed to accommodate thousands of passengers and crew members. Technology, shipbuilding and maritime technology have advanced significantly. Today's cruise ships have a range of innovative features, including advanced navigation systems, communication systems, security systems, and even entertainment and comfort technologies. Safety standards: after the Titanic disaster, maritime safety standards were greatly improved. Modern cruise ships have strict safety protocols, adequate life-saving equipment, fire prevention systems, emergency evacuation procedures, and more. Climate monitoring and communication. Today's cruise ships can make better weather predictions and communicate more effectively with maritime authorities and other ships through climate monitoring and communication technologies. Passenger comfort and entertainment. Modern cruise ships offer passengers a wide variety of activities and entertainment options. Features such as large swimming pools, water slides, gyms, spa centers, restaurants, theaters, nightclubs, and more are designed to provide passengers with a comfortable and enjoyable experience. The sinking of the Titanic had a significant impact and deeply affected people during its time. Titanic was considered the largest and most luxurious passenger ship of its era, and its sinking was a source of great pride for everyone. Therefore, the sinking of the ship was met with shock and sorrow. This shock and sorrow continue to resonate even after all these years.